Hello everyone, Nat Richards from Text on the Move here, and this video today is all about the most recent report that the Victorian Automotive Chamber of Commerce, or VCC, has put out regarding a snapshot of Australian automotive in 2020-2021 as a financial year down under. This is the first report we've seen from the VACC for the last few years, so it's a fantastic snapshot of exactly what's going on in Australia right now in automotive. And indeed, it does actually take into context both the pre-COVID happenings in automotive in Australia and what's gone on since COVID has come into all of our lives. So it's a pretty thorough report that takes on a very broad perspective, very valuable, and we should give a tip of the cap to the VACC for producing such fantastic work as always. I think it's fair to say that they are certainly Australia's most forward-thinking, most comprehensively active automotive body, so thank you to them. Now, why is this important? So if you're an Australian technician or any other automotive trade worker, I think it's nice to know exactly what's going on in your industry. I thoroughly encourage everyone to get hold of the report and give it a good read. It gives us a very clear understanding, not just of where automotive is in this country right now, but where it's headed to. And in that respect, why not have a little bit more power up your sleeve in the way that you understand the industry that you work in? For those that might be abroad, thinking about a move to Australia in the future when conditions allow, thanks to our good friend COVID, I think that the VACC's report is particularly enlightening because it does give you all, I think, a really good snapshot of what's going on down here and why the call for automotive trades workers, I think we can expect it to be quite strong in the future, and here's why. So forgive me, I'm working off a laptop beneath me so I can get these numbers across, but bear with me. So, national trends first across a couple of key automotive trades, and I should say that there's plenty more to this. I've just gone for the big ones. Light vehicle technician, of course, which makes up the bulk of automotive trades workers. In 2016 and 17, the reported shortage that the VACC had was 12,943, so about 13,000. A few years later, 2020, 2021, right now, reported shortage 17,509. So we've jumped up 4,500 in that space of time. Pretty huge jump. That's a shortage overall. 2022 to 2023 projected, they've gone for almost 24,000. So that's ramping right up really, really steeply. And that means that the shortfall in light vehicle technicians overall in Australia is expected to grow quite dramatically rather than just growing at a flat rate. So not only does that mean that the shortfall is significant and impactful right now, it's going to get worse, far worse, and more rapidly worse than it could otherwise if it was a flat growth. That should give us all a fair bit of hope for the inclusion of motor mechanics coming into Australia in the next couple of years as the borders reopen and the visa system chugs back into life. I think there's going to be lots of potential there. HGV technicians, or diesel technicians if you're an Australian. 2016 to 2017, the reported shortage at that point was 1,973. So a smaller number, but a smaller industry overall, less trucks on the road than cars, of course. 2020 to 2021, right now, 2,711. So we're not quite 1,000 higher, but as a percentage, that's actually quite a lot of growth in a negative sense for Australia. So many more diesel mechanics overall required than what we had only a few years ago. What's happening in the future? They've actually projected it's only going to grow a little bit. So 2022 to 23, they're only saying it'll be a couple of hundred higher, pretty much 3,000 on the nose. So not expecting that shortfall to grow as exponentially as what they're projecting in light vehicle, which is interesting. But nonetheless, of course, it shows a persistent shortfall in the amount of HGV or diesel mechanics to serve the Australian market. Panel beaters, another curious one. 2016 to 17, the reported shortage, 2,304. 2020 to 2021, reported shortage, 1,602. So it's actually gone down quite significantly. The projected shortage is going to remain pretty much flat. So the VACC is telling us that the situation for automotive employers looking for panel beaters is actually getting better. And we wouldn't have expected that. The feel on the ground is still very much that whilst paint and panel has been a little bit uneven through COVID, panel beaters remain a very rare trade indeed, and plenty of demand out there still. So that one's interesting. We'll keep an eye on it. Boiling down to a little bit of a closer look at the states, and admittedly this is probably going to be a little bit more of a curiosity for those internationally that are thinking about coming to Australia once conditions allow. Let's have a look at what's going on in the states. So light vehicle technicians, I'm going to focus on them exclusively here because I think this speaks the most to the most people. New South Wales, so home state of Sydney for those that aren't completely familiar with Australian geography. 9% fall in workers in the last 2 years working as light vehicle techs. So that's pretty significant if you zoom out. That is a lot of people that are no longer working as light vehicle technicians who were only 2 years ago, 9%. 28% of the national shortfall overall, so there's about 17,500 too few mechanics in Australia, light vehicle techs that is. 28% of those 17,500 are missing from New South Wales alone. That's a very big chunk of the pie. And I should note that that includes the Australian Capital Territory, ACT, where Canberra is inside New South Wales. Victoria, home state of Melbourne, 18% fall in light vehicle technicians in 2 years. It's absolutely huge. So the numbers of motor mechanics available to the market down there has fallen off a cliff. 22% of the national shortfall is in Victoria, so not quite the huge number that New South Wales and ACT make up, but still pretty dramatic. And between those two, New South Wales and Victoria, 50% of our overall skills shortage in light vehicle techs is in those two states. Queensland, always an interesting place for anyone that's thinking about coming from overseas. 10% fall in workers there over the last 2 years. So about on par with New South Wales, not quite as dramatic as Victoria, but still definitely worth talking about. That's huge. 25% of the national shortfall in that state. So they're certainly contributing their fair share toward the overall shortfall as well. Very important to keep in mind. Western Australia, again, a hot spot for everyone from abroad to consider when they're looking at coming to Australia. Not the same story. Roughly flat over the last 2 years is the shortfall in mechanics over there. So they've not lost the amount of people working as light vehicle mechanics in that state as we have on the East Coast. They actually grew in between as well. So statistically a bit interesting. They had more mechanics in the year before the current one. And then that's tapered back off again to be roughly on par with what it was 2 years ago. 12% of the national shortage overall is in that state. So there's still a shortfall overall, even though it hasn't been increasing over the last couple of years, and about 12% of the overall shortage of the country is estimated to be in that state. The important thing to think about though with Western Australia is that the shortfalls of light vehicle techs in that state, around 60% of them are estimated to be in regional areas, meaning that there's actually a lot more work opportunity in WA outside of Perth than there is inside of it, and the makeup of that state means that Perth is still a more difficult place to get into in terms of employment opportunities and sponsorship if we're talking about visas than what the rest of the state can be. So there you have it. 75% of the demand for techs overall, if we're talking about skills shortages, comes from Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria working down the East Coast. So if you've got one eye on Australia in the future, East Coast is probably worth thinking very carefully about. So that's it, that's the wrap. There's so much more to talk about in that VACC report, and I think I'll probably be posting some more stuff about it shortly, but that's the first shot to get us cracking. If you've got anything that you'd like to talk about from all of that, please hit us up. You're welcome to get in touch. Text on the Move. My name's Nat Richards. You can find all our details online. Thank you.